Good day. It is becoming increasingly clear that in its urgency to try to repair relations with Russia, at least to some extent, in order to stabilize the situation in Europe, the new US administration is pulling out the stops and is prepared to make what, what must be seen as significant concessions. Now, the latest information as to what those concessions might be has come from a report published by Axios, which is sourced to two officials within the administration, and it relates to Nord Stream 2, the gas pipeline which Russia and Germany agreed in 2015 and which is currently in the last stages of construction and which is due to supply natural gas from Russia to Germany, bypassing Ukraine. This pipeline has come in for passionate opposition, obviously from Ukraine itself, but also from Ukraine's European allies, Poland, the Baltic states, and Britain, as well as from many politicians in the United States. The Trump administration made clear its strong opposition to the Nord Stream 2 pipeline, and in words, the Biden-Harris administration has repeated that opposition. Indeed, Secretary Blinken spoke the other day to German Foreign Minister Maas and again appeared to reiterate the US's opposition to Nord Stream 2. However, the fact remains that Germany, despite all this pressure, remains committed to Nord Stream 2, and the Russians have indicated that Nord Stream 2 may be completed as soon as September, before the Bundestag elections in Germany take place. For the Germans, Nord Stream 2 is a critical economic project. It promises to supply Germany with cheap pipeline gas from Russia, which Germany needs in order to cover the transition as Germany phases out its nuclear power, coal and oil generating plants until it is able to replace them with what it hopes will be carbon-free energy from things like wind power and solar power. Natural gas, having a much smaller footprint, carbon footprint, than oil and coal, is the way to fill that gap in a reasonably cheap way. It is strongly sought, the pipeline for that reason is strongly sought and backed by German industry, and no German government, not even a Green-led government, which might conceivably come to power in Germany in September, can realistically go against it. So the Germans have been committed to Nord Stream 2, the Russians have been intent on building it, the United States attempted to stop it, the Trump administration announced various sanctions against it, the Biden-Harris administration indicated that it might be minded to persist with those sanctions, but it seems now that those sanctions are not going to be pursued and are therefore in effect a dead letter. I say that because this is what the report from Axios says, and I will read parts of it now in detail. The Biden administration will waive sanctions on the corporate entity and CEO overseeing the construction of Russia's Nord Stream 2 pipeline into Germany, according to two sources briefed on the decision. This indicates the Biden administration is not willing to compromise its relationship with Germany over this pipeline, and it underscores the difficulties President Biden faces in matching actions to rhetoric on a tougher approach to Russia. The State Department will imminently send its mandatory 90-day report to Congress, listing entities involved in Nord Stream 2, that deserve sanctions. Sources familiar with the drafting of the report tell Axios the State Department plans to call for sanctions against a handful of Russian ships. The State Department will also acknowledge that the corporate entity in charge of the project, Nord Stream 2 AG, and its CEO, Putin crony, how Axios describes him, and former East German intelligence officer Matthias Warnig are engaged in sanctionable activities. However, the State Department will waive the applications of those sanctions, citing US national interests. So, no sanctions on Nord Stream 2 AG, no sanctions against Matthias Warnig, and the pipeline, therefore, will be built. There is still a court case in Germany brought by an ecological group trying to stop the pipeline, but that seems to be almost predestined to fail. The German regulator has just announced that the Russian pipeline ships are permitted to lay pipes to complete the pipeline in Germany's economic zone. So we are almost there with Nord Stream 2, and the United States has finally and conclusively accepted this. It doesn't obviously want to ruffle feathers in Germany, and of course it doesn't want to annoy Russia at a time when the Biden-Harris administration is looking to patch things up with Russia and is trying to get the Russians to agree to a summit meeting between President Putin of Russia and President Biden of the United States. The latest word about that, by the way, is that the most likely venue of that summit meeting will not be Vienna, as originally suggested, but will probably be Geneva in Switzerland. We shall see. Well, it's not a done thing with Nord Stream 2. We can't say for a fact that it will be a done thing until the pipeline is finished and the gas is passing through it. There is always the possibility that between now and September, or whenever the pipeline is finished, some great crisis will arise and the US might start imposing sanctions. The sanctions it's indicated today that it won't impose, or perhaps the Germans and the Europeans will pull out of it as some sort of response to a major crisis involving Russia. The obvious place for such a crisis is, of course, Ukraine. However, that does now look increasingly unlikely. As I said in a recent program for this channel, one of the reasons why the Germans seem to have been so opposed to the possibility of a war in eastern Ukraine this year is because they were clearly worried that if a war like that took place and if Ukraine were defeated, then they would be obliged to give up Nord Stream 2, which quite obviously is something they are desperate not to do. So it looks as if the overwhelming probability is that Nord Stream 2 will now be a done thing. I may add that the Russian Central Bank has simultaneously said that it has received assurances from Europe and from SWIFT, the headquarters of SWIFT in Brussels, SWIFT, of course, being the interbank payment system, of which Russia is a member, and which some politicians and political leaders and governments have been pressing should cut Russia off and cut off the Russian banks that use it. Anyway, SWIFT has apparently given assurances to the Russians that the question of Russia's disconnection from SWIFT is absolutely not on the agenda. So it seems that the Russians are going to get Nord Stream 2 and that the idea of disconnecting them from SWIFT has been put off, at least for the time being. Well, I have to say My own view about all of this is that the whole battle over Nord Stream 2 that the United States and its allies have tried to wage in order to stop this pipeline being built was always an exercise in futility and one which always overestimated, overstated the political importance of this pipeline. Yes, it will provide Russia with a transit, with an opportunity to avoid having to transit gas through Ukraine. Yes, the days when Ukraine will be a transit state for Russian gas are surely numbered. But no, it will not change political allegiances in Europe. It will not cause Germany to drift into the Russian orbit and to separate itself from NATO. And no, it does not provide the Russians with economic leverage over Germany, which they can use to extract political concessions. The Russians have never used gas supply in that way, if for no other reason, because they know if they did, that they would put their position as a reliable supplier of gas to Germany and to Europe in jeopardy. They're never going to do it. They never have done it. And Nord Stream 2 is neither here nor there on that topic, because people, when they talk about Russia using gas as a weapon, are frankly talking nonsense. One country will come out of this a loser, and that country is, of course, Ukraine. And I suspect that the Ukrainians, who were almost certainly informed of this decision by the United States to waive the sanctions on Nord Stream 2 AG and on Matthias Iwanek during Secretary Blinken's recent visit to Kiev, have almost certainly reacted by this bizarre statement, which has just been circulated by the Foreign Affairs Committee of the European Parliament, which is headed, by the way, by Andreas Kubelius, who is a former Lithuanian prime minister and somebody who is known to be profoundly hostile to Russia. The document is completely bizarre. In fact, I'm going to say straight away that for me it is written in the most unbalanced, even deranged language. It speaks openly about Russian aggression. It talks about the need to support democratization in Russia through all kinds of coercive means, democratization being, of course, code for regime change. It talks about ramping up sanctions. And of course, it talks about Nord Stream 2. And this is what it says. In line with the democracy first principle, the EU should strengthen the requirement of conditionality in its relations with Russia by including in any dialogue or agreement with Russia measures aimed at protecting human rights and the holding of free elections. Accordingly, the EU and its member states should revise their investment support and economic cooperation projects, starting with the halting of the Nord Stream 2 project. Well, that, I suspect, has been rushed out after consultations by Ukraine with its European allies, of which, of course, Lithuania, along with the two other Baltic states, Latvia and Estonia, and Poland is one. But the fact is that the European Parliament can issue as many declarations as it likes. Germany is intent on having Nord Stream 2. The United States has given up all efforts to try to stop it, and Nord Stream 2 is now almost certain to be built. We will not have to worry and debate and discuss Nord Stream 2 for much longer, for which I will say straight away, I am entirely thankful. I doubt there will be any follow-up pipelines, however, from Russia to Europe after Nord Stream 2. Even if the Germans come along and request a Nord Stream 3 or a Nord Stream 4, I expect the Russians after all the trouble they've gone to with Nord Stream 2, to say no. The Russians will have won an important political and diplomatic victory once Nord Stream 2 is completed, but it will be, as I have said, essentially a symbolic one. From now on, the weight of Russian economic and energy cooperation will be less and less with Europe and more with China. I'm going to be doing a video about that imminently. In the meantime, Ukraine must look forward to a day when it has lost its role as a transit state. It has, of course, lost Crimea and the leverage that the great naval base at Sevastopol once gave it. It's now been told in emphatic terms by its Western allies that they will not support it in any attempt it may make to try to reconquer the two Donbass republics, the Donetsk and Lugansk People's Republics, by force. And the Russians have made absolutely clear that they will not in any way backtrack on the Minsk agreement, which requires Ukraine to negotiate directly with the leaders of the Donetsk and Lugansk People's Republics, something which Ukraine has consistently refused to do. The Ukrainians must be starting to feel that the pressure on them is building, perhaps to intolerable levels. Well, they will have to make adjustments in their policies if they're going to start to repair the damage they have done to their own society as a result of the extraordinary steps they began to take, not just with the Maidan revolution of 2014, but arguably going all the way back to the Orange Revolution of 2003-2004. But that is a problem for another day. For the moment, all we need to know is that it looks as if Nord Stream 2 is done and that the United States has finally and formally accepted the fact. Thank you for joining me for this program on this channel. Please also check us out on our main channel, The Duran, where I do programs with my colleague and friend Alex Christoforou. Please also check us out on our other platforms, BitChute, Odyssey, SuperTube, and Locals. Please also look out for the exclusive videos we also make for those channels. You'll find links both to our platforms, to our other platforms, and to our other channel under this video. Please also, by the way, remember to look up Alex Christoforou's own channel, which appears both on YouTube and on our other platforms. Please also support us to the extent that you can via PayPal, Patreon, and Subscribestar. And last but not least, please go to our Discord server and remember to check out our shop and to look up the wonderful things you will find there, our amazing magic mugs, our hats, our hoodies, our sweatshirts, and our famous t-shirts. And thank you for joining me for this program. Please check your subscription. And if you like this video, please remember to press the like button. Thank you very much for joining me again, and have a wonderful day.